Hi, everyone, and welcome to Reimagine Agriculture, the podcast where we explore the future of farming, food, and rural life across Europe through the eyes of the people shaping it. I'm Teresa Carvalho, and in this series, we'll meet people from across Europe who are reshaping the future of agriculture. Today, we're joined by Jens Bodens, the co president of Generation Climate Europe, the largest coalition of youth led climate organizations in Europe. By uniting youth networks, GCE creates a platform for the youth to advocate for a just and green transition in Europe. Hi, Jens.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So, to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role as co president at Generation Climate Europe? What motivated you to get involved in climate and environmental advocacy?
Yes, as you said, my name is Jens. By day, I'm a master's student at the University of Italy, but I'm also the co-president of Generation Climate Europe. It's a youth organization who works on climate and environmental advocacy at the European level. I also do have a farmer's background. I grew up in a family farm in Norway. My dad is the ninth generation farmer in a row in our family, and my brother will be the 10th generation taking over next year. So food has always been an important part of my life, but also growing up on a farm, you grow up very close to nature and to the environment, and so it's always also been very important issues for me. I also do come from like a politically engaged family, so growing up talking about political issues were always part of the everyday conversations. And I think at some point I looked around and I tried to figure out what are the most important issues that we need to solve in the upcoming years. And I landed on, of course, climate change seems to be like the biggest one, so that's the one I would like to get more involved with.
And for listeners that might not be familiar with Generation Climate Europe, could you tell us a bit more about the work that you do and the objectives of your organization?
Of course. So Generation Climate Europe, the organization, it's not super old. We started back in 2018, 2019. And if you think back to this time, it was like you had Greta Thunberg, you had the Fridays for Futures, you had all these young people going out in the streets fighting for climate action. Of course, very uplifting and great to be part of. But there was also this sense that even though you have a lot of young people who are super engaged, who want to see all this change, there's not a lot of avenues for young people to actually participate in the decision making processes. So we had this group of European youth networks that came together and decided we want to do more when it comes to climate and environment. We want to create more opportunities for young people to participate in these discussions. At first, they started doing some like joint statements and working together a little bit on climate and environmental policies, and then it sort of evolved into a more formalized cooperation and then a fully-fledged organization. So we were born out of this the same movement as the Fridays for Futures and a lot of other youth organizations and climate and environmental organizations, with the aim of creating opportunities for young people to engage in the actual decision-making processes on climate policies.
So, when we talk about food and agriculture in Europe, we're often also talking about the EU's Common Agricultural Policy, or the CAP, as we call it. It's one of the EU's biggest and oldest policies. It shapes how land is used, food is produced, and how public money supports farming. And even if people don't follow EU policy closely, CAP decisions end up affecting landscapes, biodiversity, and ultimately what ends in our plates. So, although CAP is often discussed in technical terms, its effects are very tangible. It influences farming practices, environmental standards, and how much support goes to different types of agriculture. Do you feel that young people generally see the connection between EU level decisions on environmental protection, food production, and how it affects their everyday lives? Or do these policies still feel kind of distant and abstract?
I do think this is an issue with a lot of European level policy discussions that they become far away. You feel disconnected. It's difficult to maybe understand what kind of effect they do have directly on your everyday life. And especially as young people, I think it's often wrapped in technical terms and difficult concepts that you feel like you need to have a bachelor's degree at least in order to be able to understand just what they're talking about. I do think the reason why it is like that is because you need to have good technical language in order to speak properly about the things that you want to change and um, the actions that you want to implement. But there's the way I see it, there's a trade-off between having these good, very detailed like policy discussions, but then they become so disconnected from normal people all across the continent, especially young people. And that reduces the trust I think people have in politicians and in the system in general. So yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge.
And why is it important to involve young people specifically in these decisions?
So if you look at Europe as a whole at the moment, about 30% of the people are under 30. Do you want to guess what's the percentage of young people under 30 in the parliaments across the continent?
2%.
It's 3% actually. So I mean, 30% of Europeans are under 30. 3% of parliamentarians are under 30, and in the European Parliament, it's even worse. It's about 0.4%. Um, and so the representation of young people in decision-making processes, in policy processes, it's very skewed, it's very low. And I think especially that's why it's so important to involve young people in the discussions, at least, to talk to them as part of those processes. Because you're not part of the decision making, at least you need to be part of the discussion. And I think this puts also a big responsibility onto politicians to ensure that they do talk to young people, and then I think another thing that makes it more important is that if you look at, I'm in my 20s right now, like the way I grew up and the outlook I have on my future life right now, it's very different from someone who was in their 20s, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years ago. So with the way the society is changing so fast as well, it's even more important to ensure that young people are also taken into account into decision-making processes.
Totally, totally agree. And one of the areas where CAP has increasingly placed emphasis is environmental performance, including biodiversity and climate action. And this is also where many youth climate organizations, including GC, are particularly active. So, in your view, how does the way we produce food affect ecosystems, and why does that matter for the long term sustainability of our food systems?
In GCE, we talk a lot about the triple planetary crisis, which I think is all parts of that is connected to the way we produce food. We often hear about climate change and the climate crisis, but there is also the biodiversity crisis and pollution, and these are separate issues but super interconnected, and they all connect to the way we produce food, the way we use our resources, the way we use our nature. Um, and so it's important to have all of this in mind, I think, when you design agricultural policies. But then I think it's also an important point how we use our land, how we use our ecosystems, and how we protect them. It's not only connected also to the food policies or the agricultural policies. It also connects to a lot of other policy areas. It's like how we regulate land for roads or for housing. In Norway, for example, we have a big issue with cabin building in the mountains, which is like one of the things that takes the most untouched natural areas and has a big impact on the ecosystems. So I think it's important to also when you discuss food policies to keep in mind the connections also to all of these other policy areas.
Building on the importance of food systems and land use, the way these topics are discussed and who is included in those conversations really matters. From your experience working with youth networks, how can nature protection and farming livelihoods be better aligned in public discussions about agriculture?
I think what you often see in the public discussion about agriculture and food in general, especially when you talk about sustainability, is that it quickly boils down to quite polarized points of view. It quickly boils down to like a meat or no meat sort of discussion. And you have very strong opinions on both sides, and then maybe most people are somewhere in the middle, but feeling a bit left out of the discussion. Another problem that you often see is that it develops also in this sort of us versus them narrative. So it's us, the climate activists, versus them, the farmers. And then you frame the farmers as the problem and the climate activists as the sort of solution. And I think we need to move away from this like polarized discussion and this way of seeing it as us versus them, and move into seeing it rather as all of us living in this society against a problem. The problem being climate change, unsustainable practices, um, and ensuring that we can talk with each other, ensure that like we feel like we're part of the same team, trying to tackle the same problem together, rather than trying to distance people with different views than us, and that we still need to be talking to in order to find good solutions on these topics.
And these debates often happen at EU level, but they're shaped by input from civil society. Youth organizations like GCE don't design policy, but they do engage with policymakers and they do bring in perspectives that might otherwise be missing, thereby acting as a bridge between young people and EU decision making processes. In this context, how can young people meaningfully engage in shaping EU policies that affect agriculture, food systems, and nature, even for those without a policy background?
I think the best way to start getting involved in these issues is to start with what's important to you and also what's close to you. At least that's how I started myself. Started getting involved with the local issues, not even the national issues in Norway, but just like the local issues that I cared about around me. Joining organizations where you can learn more, linking up with other people who are also engaged with the same topics. um, it's important to start with what's close and what's easy to understand, and then you can, if you're interested, build your way to like national levels and European levels if you find it interesting. And then if you want to start directly with the European level, there's also a lot of good resources online. So just start with Googling your way, I think, maybe asking AI even to help you out to find the good resources and the good places to start. And then, of course, if you want to learn more, you can join Generation Climate Europe or other youth organizations as well. We're happy to have new volunteers who want to be part of the solution.
Looking ahead, debates around the CAB and food systems are really debates about what kind of future we want, environmentally, socially, and economically. In such cases, environmental measures are sometimes presented as a challenge for farmers, especially in economic terms. But there's also growing discussion about whether healthier ecosystems can actually support more resilient agriculture. What principles do you think should guide Europe's transition towards more sustainable and fair food systems?
When I get questions like this, I always go back to my sort of farmer's background. And growing up, my parents would always say to us that yes, we live on the farm at the moment, but we don't really own this farm. This farm is something that we borrowed from the generations before us, and that we're going to give to the generations that are coming after us. And we are just managing it for the time being, and it's our responsibility to take care of it, to make sure that we use it in a sustainable way, that we manage the natural resources that are part of the land and the forest and the fjord, um, and that we can give it to the next generation in the same or a better condition than when we got it. And I think that's also my starting point for everything when it comes to climate and environmental policies as well, sustainability in general. The earth is not ours to own, it's ours to use for a while. And we need to make sure that the way we use it doesn't degrade it, doesn't make it worse. It needs to be in the same or a better condition when we hand it down to the next generation. That's not something we're very good at the moment, but I think it should definitely be a principle and an overall goal that should guide all our policies, not just within food, but also in other policies areas.
Totally. And finally, what message would you like to leave with young people who want to protect nature, reshape our food systems, and be part of a more sustainable future?
On this one, I tend to it's almost a little bit embarrassing, but I go back to this like Tumblr quote, which is be the change you want to see in the world. I think that's nice. You have to start with yourself, your own actions, and the things that you can do. Though at the same time, I think it's important to keep in mind that we shouldn't put all the responsibility for climate change and for sustainable actions onto the individuals. The problems with the world at the moment, it's related to the systems, it's how we build our societies and the way we set up our economies. So, of course, do the change or be the change you want to see. Try to contribute what you can, but keep in mind it's not only your responsibility. We need to work on changing the systems because that's when we're going to see the big changes.
Thank you so much, Jens, for joining us today and for this interesting conversation. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Reimagine Agriculture, part of the Recap Project, where we bring forward the voices helping to shape a more sustainable, inclusive, and community driven future for European farming. See you in the next episode.